Welcome back to another episode of Bible Conversations. Today we're going to be continuing our character study and looking at Daniel. All right, so you may be wondering, Daniel? Like, we fast forwarded all the way through most of the Old Testament. Last one we talked about was Gideon, and now we're stopping off at Daniel.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way, but we didn't want to spend months and months on these character studies, and we still have some to get to in the New Testament. And so, it might be something we come back to and look at some of the other judges, some of the kings.
Especially if someone says, "Hey, do this guy or do this lady," we will certainly do that. So if you guys have a request of somebody that you'd like us to do a character study on, please let us know. We'd love to.
Yeah, absolutely. But for today, it's Daniel. And he is one of my favorite characters in the Old Testament. You know, we were just talking before we got started here that there's so many similarities with Daniel and Joseph. The way that they're kind of taken into a foreign land, that they are not highly regarded at all. Joseph works his way up, falls back down, works his way back up again, and eventually, towards the end of Joseph's life, he's the second in command in all of Egypt. And Pharaoh says, like other than me, there's nobody else that can tell you what to do. You are in charge of everyone but me, is what Pharaoh tells him. Yeah. And we see at the end of Daniel's story, he winds up in the exact same position in all of Babylon. Yeah. That there's nobody that can tell Daniel what to do, and there's nobody that can tell Daniel that they don't want to listen to him except for the king himself.
Yeah. And the same thing is true of Mordecai. With the Persians
at the end of the book of Esther.
Yeah. So you've got Mordecai, who's a Jew, who's in pretty relatively high standing. I mean, the people listen to him, and then Haman makes the attack against the Jews. So now he's in sackcloth and ashes in front of the king's gate. Yeah. And then he saves the king. Nothing happens then, but soon after he's elevated and he's put on the king's horse. Yeah. And he's ridden around the city. Right, and so he's elevated there, and then he goes back to being at the king's gate because the Jews are still going to die. Yeah, right. Like it's an interesting thing. Haman is asked of the king, what would you do for the man in whom the king delights? Yeah. And Haman's like, man, give me your robe, give the horse you're riding on. Well, Mordecai would have been like, save the Jews, right? Like his priorities a little different. And then he's elevated. He gets all of Haman's stuff. He's second in command of Persia. And I think what we see throughout the scriptures is that God is able to bring his people wherever he wants his people to be. Yep. Which is a really, really cool thing. Yeah. And what's cool also is just kind of the history buff in me that likes to go through and line up all of these old accounts and see, where does even Ezra and Nehemiah fit in when they were taking some of the remnant of Israel back to the promised land and rebuilding the temple, rebuilding the city of Jerusalem. And while Daniel is actually still over in Babylon, he doesn't go back with them. It's just an interesting study when you line up all of these Old Testament accounts. So, but Daniel, we'll start in chapter 1 with Daniel. And we see that he is he's part of the nation of Israel that's taken away to Babylon, that's taken into captivity. And almost immediately in this book of Daniel, we're introduced to the kind of man that he is. The character that he has, his faithfulness that he has to God. And that's something that's evident throughout the book, but it's right away we're introduced. This is the type of individual that Daniel is. Yes. Well, so you've got Nebuchadnezzar, right? The king of Judah at this point, which was really, I guess, the last king of Judah, before they were the entire nation taken into captivity, is Jehoiakim, right? And then what you've got in verse 3, it says the king, which is Nebuchadnezzar, commanded Ashpenaz, the chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance, and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. So So who they choose then is the noble people, the noble Israelites, the high-ranking people in Israel, and they're smart, they're good-looking. Because, I mean, what the king doesn't want to be surrounded – this is going to sound politically incorrect, but the king doesn't want to be surrounded by ugly people who are dumb, right?
Absolutely.
The king does not want that. The king wants to be surrounded by smart, intelligent, beautiful people, right? Because that then increases his own viewpoint of what others see him and how others view him. And so he chooses that. And it says in verse 5, the king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate. Now that's a pretty neat little thing to be assigned to have a royal feast. Yep. That is what they are eating, a royal feast. And that includes the wine, that includes the meat, that includes all the stuff. Whatever the king ate, which would have been the best in the land, that's what they were going to eat. It says also of the wine that he drank, they were to be educated for 3 years. And at the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. Now, 3 years is a long time.
Yeah, so it's like this regimen that he's putting them through. He's quite honestly trying to strengthen his kingdom. Yep. That's at the root of it is if he can have a stronger king's court, if he can have a better group of the nobles, the people that are the higher officials in his kingdom, then
his retinue,
his overall kingdom is going to increase in power. If he has more people that he trusts to put in charge of others, then that's going to just increase the power of his kingdom. And so by putting them through this regimen, one, he's trying to get them used to his culture with the food, but also through the education, getting them used to the king's culture, but also
their language.
Yeah, their language. And he's also just trying to educate them overall. Just make them wiser people. Yeah, make them better.
Well, and that's such a smart move. I mean, you see the most successful business people today, they surround themselves with people who are going to lift them up and bring them up. And
exactly.
That's all he's trying to do. He's trying to raise and grow his kingdom.
Yeah.
Which that's a smart thing to do.
Yeah, very good strategy. Yeah. But you see in verse 8 that Daniel is not going to have any part of at least defiling himself with the food.
Correct. Or with the wine.
Or with the wine. Yeah, that's what I mean. Just like anything that he intakes. Yeah. And he knows, hey, this is not right. This is not what God has commanded me to do. I can't partake of this.
Which imagine being in that position, right? You have just been abducted by this nation who destroyed your nation in war and battle, right? Like it wasn't like it was.
Well, it says in verse 1, they came to Jerusalem and besieged it.
Yeah.
You know, you can look at historical accounts that Jerusalem was surrounded. They were cut off from all supplies, and things got very, very bad there. This is a family show, so I won't go too far into it. But they were
beaten.
They were on starvation. They were being starved in order to conquer this city. And so once they did, then they just tore it apart, and Babylon took him away into captivity. And that's where Daniel's sitting at now.
Yeah, and so he's surrounded by all these people who have just conquered his people, who have conquered him, and he has some might call it the gall, the audacity. What I call it is the bravery and the courage to stand up and say, I'm not eating that.
Yeah.
Like I'm not. And so really it says he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. So it wasn't like he just straight up refused to do this.
Yeah. Not defiant.
Correct. He asked for permission. He said basically, hey, there's a better way for me to eat and a better way for me to do this. Is it possible that I cannot defile myself according to my faith, my religion, and do something else? It says God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
And I was going to say it only took 10 days for this to be shown that Daniel knows what he's doing. Yeah. Because
verse 12.
This I think they call him the chief eunuch or the chief of the eunuchs is basically telling Daniel, he's like, I don't want to be like in trouble myself if I don't have you go through this regimen that has been lined out by the king.
Yeah.
And then he looks upon you and he's like, why is this boy not healthy?
Why are you all scrawny? Why can I see your ribs? Right?
Yes. Yeah. Then this chief of the eunuchs would be like, I'm going to be in trouble myself. And so Daniel says, just give us 10 days. Not even a week and a half, and test our appearance versus the appearance of the others.
Yep.
And then you'll know that we're being faithful to God, because he's going to bless us. And that's the message really that I think we can take from this, is that it's not a matter, it's not a Bible class of like, kids, eat your vegetables and drink your water, but instead it's a Bible.
Certainly do that.
Certainly do that. Yeah. But that's not like the point. It's not because of what he ate.
Correct.
It caused him to become healthier.
He chose to glorify God.
Exactly. And God blessed him because he made that choice.
And that couldn't have been an easy choice. Like, it could not have been easy to ask permission. It could not have been easy to, that food probably looked so unbelievably appetizing too.
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, and it was commonplace at that point to drink wine, right? To do so. I mean, there's so many things about that would have been appetizing and easy to fall into, but Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to do that, which is, it takes so much strength, I think, to be able to do that. You get to the end of chapter 1, it says, God gave them learning, verse 17, and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. And we don't have time to go over the dreams and the interpretations and the visions that Daniel had, as much as we might like to.
Yeah, I mean, to summarize, basically, Nebuchadnezzar has multiple dreams throughout these next couple of chapters that he is just confused by. He doesn't know what this dream means, and so Daniel is the one that's brought in.
Well, there's a whole bunch of other people brought him first.
Oh yeah, a whole bunch of other people.
All the magicians, wise men, everybody.
Yeah, nobody can figure out what it is, and so Daniel's the one that's brought in, and he's able to interpret the king's dream for him
without the king telling him what the dream was.
That's absolutely fantastic too. Yeah. And again, another parallel that I see back to Joseph is that's exactly how Joseph had his rise throughout the kingdom. Is he was able to interpret Pharaoh's dream, but again, it's not a matter of Daniel saying, I've studied, I've done X, Y, Z so that I can do this upon my own power to tell the king that I know everything. Instead, it's Daniel just coming in and saying,
this is the dream you had. This is what it means.
It's God revealing it to you through me, and that's all it is. And that's the fantastic thing about even today when we're trying to share the gospel. It's not a matter of, hey, here's what I've studied, here's all this knowledge that I've gained that I want to pour out upon somebody else. Instead, it's God revealing the gospel to you, and he's just using me as a vessel to do so. We have to channel the same kind of energy that Daniel and also Joseph and so many others have. Is I'm just a vessel that God is using to present his message to the world.
What's the phrase? Vibing? Is that the phrase that the kids use nowadays? To vibe?
Vibe? Yeah. Oh, you're asking about like this channel the same kind of energy? Yeah. Not really.
No.
The right context for that word. But
wrong context.
I appreciate you trying.
That's what happens when you get old. You lose sight of all the isms.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to chapter 3. So we're going to not necessarily take a break from Daniel, but we're going to take a little bit of break from Daniel and talk about his 3 friends.
Daniel takes a break from Daniel.
That's
true.
In
chapter 3.
Yeah. So we've got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And the king, Nebuchadnezzar, it says he's made an image of gold, right? So it's an idol, whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. So this is a massive golden image. Yeah. And basically everybody is to bow down to it, is to pay homage to it. Verse 4 says, the herald proclaimed aloud, you are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages. In other words, everybody. Mm-hmm. But that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon. What's a trigon? Do you know what a trigon is?
No idea.
Okay. Harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning, fiery furnace. And so we have this command, we have this decree, and we have this idol. And so everybody in the entire nation is to bow down to it whenever they hear really any kind of music. I'm going to look up what a trigon is here in a little bit once you start talking.
And I was going to say, what's kind of interesting about this is this is coming on the heels of after Daniel has interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's first dream. Nebuchadnezzar is just blown away, and he says in verse 47 of chapter 2, the king answered and said to Daniel, truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. So that's the
setup.
The setup to this is that Nebuchadnezzar just made the statement that, wow, your God is God of gods. Your God is the Lord of all lords. He is the top one. Now, obviously, Nebuchadnezzar still kind of
didn't fully believe that.
I think one didn't fully believe that, but also not fully understanding what it means to have just one God. Yeah. Because if he's saying he's God of gods and Lord of kings, which is why I think when we get to chapter 3, he still feels right in his own heart to set up this golden image and have people worship him, because he's thinking, I understand Daniel's God is greater than me, but I still want my worship that's due to me as well.
Correct. Yeah. Well, because those kings thought that they were gods in and of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's where we get is it's not so much that Nebuchadnezzar is just automatically reverse his thinking from what we get in the end of chapter 22. Instead, he's still trying to put himself up on a high pedestal, maybe not as high as Daniel's God, but he's still trying to elevate himself up there to a status that can be worshipped.
And he may not even see that as any sort of a contradiction, right?
Exactly.
If you have so many different gods, well, we're just honoring this one for this time.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's where his mindset is at.
Yeah. So a trigon. Yeah. Figured out what it is. It is a triangular lyre or harp of Roman and Greek antiquity.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it's obviously.
So a harp in triangle form.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, cool.
The other thing it is a supervillain in the DC universe. So
wow, okay.
Yeah, I knew about that one, but that's not what they were talking about.
I don't think that's what they're talking about.
So anyway, all right. So it's a musical instrument, right? So we move forward and we have that this decree has been made, right? And there are, verse 12, there are certain Jews whom you, talking to the king, these are some other officials, people who are talking to the king, says who you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, right? So these officials are talking to the king and saying, hey, listen, you have made these guys officials here. Yeah. And they, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these men, O king, pay no attention to you.
Yeah.
They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. And so Nebuchadnezzar, he gets angry. He gets mad. Right? Which, if you believe that you are a god, right, or you believe that you have some sort of authority or ability to be worshipped, and you find out that people are not doing that, that seems like an appropriate response to be angry.
Yeah. And one of the things that we talked about before we started here is like, okay, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are mentioned as though they did not bow down to this golden image. What about Daniel? What about all of the other Israelites that are brought over from
they do
in captivity? What did they do? And to be honest, I almost could see there being a whole lot of individuals that kind of slink back into the shadows and avoid bowing down, but not in such a
blazing manner.
Yeah, not in your face. We are going to stand here and not bow down. Type of manner that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. Yeah. Because I have a very difficult time believing that Daniel bowed down to this golden image. I have a very difficult time believing that every other Jew besides Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego bowed down to this golden image. Like I said, because there are so many other individuals present at this time.
And these three are also in the spotlight.
Yeah.
Right? Like they are leaders of whatever it is. They're the leaders of the province of Babylon. Now, Daniel is the head of the province of Babylon. Like he has been elevated high. And
he's in the king's court.
Yes.
And so honestly, another possibility is Daniel could be out of town. Honestly, he could be visiting other provinces at this moment. Between the time that the image is set up and the music is played, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown in the fiery furnace, and then Daniel gets back to town and the image has already been destroyed because
we don't know exactly what, but we can assume that it is more than 3 people.
Yeah.
However, these 3 are what we hear about. It's what we know about.
They're the ones that are called to the carpet.
Yeah. So we'll make this relatively short, this story, because most of y'all have heard it. Most of y'all know it. So the 3 of them are not only thrown into the furnace, but they're asked to turn. The guards are asked to turn the furnace up to 7 times its normal heat, and that's hot enough that when the guards get close enough to throw them in, they themselves, the guards, are burned up. And so, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're bound. They can't really move well. Their hands are bound. Like they're done for. They're going to die. Any normal instance in human history, they're going to die.
And they're prepared for that too.
Yeah.
Because they even say to the king, in verse 16, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you on this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us."
Think about saying that to a king.
Yeah.
We don't need to answer you.
Yeah. And they say in verse 18, "But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." In other words, they're prepared. If they're going to face death here in this furnace, then
they're going to die.
They're prepared to do so.
Yep.
They say our God's able to deliver us, but even if he chooses not to, then we're still not going to bow down to you or your golden image.
And it's interesting that it is because of that answer that he turns the heat up to 7 times.
Yeah, that's what makes him angry.
Right? It's like he's already angry that they haven't done it.
Yeah.
But then he goes and he talks to him. He's trying to reason it, like, guys, why are y'all not? And he said, hey, we don't really need to answer you. Yeah. We'll answer you, but we don't need to. Yeah. Our God is able.
In verse 19, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Yeah. Like almost just like you can see it turning red, like with anger.
Yeah. And I think that's also an inward change too from he appointed them as leaders, right? And so he's like, all right, nah.
Yeah.
Never again, right?
He feels betrayed.
Yeah. So they're thrown in. It says in verse 21, these men were bound in their tunics, in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Mm-hmm. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down in the burning fiery furnace. So the guards died. The ones that threw them in died.
Yeah.
Right? So it's hot. Like it is really, really hot. And then verse 24, this is really cool. King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." He answered and said, "But I see 4 men, unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." So I have heard some sermons on this. I've heard discussions on this. People saying that it's Jesus. People saying that it's an angel. Yeah. I don't have a definitive answer on my end. But regardless of what it is, we know that it is the presence of God that is with them. Yep. That much I am 100% confident in saying. The presence of God is with them, and what form he took, I don't know. But the presence of God is there. They are saved. And it says when they come out of the fire, they're called out. It says in verse 27, the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of these men. Those men, their hair of their heads was not singed. Their cloaks were not harmed. And get this, no smell of fire had come upon them.
Yeah, in other words, they don't even smell like smoke.
No, like when you go to a campfire, you walk away and you smell like smoke for the next day.
Yeah.
Even after you shower.
Yeah.
These guys did not, nothing. They weren't affected by it.
Yeah. And again, it's this miraculous thing, very similar to the burning bush that Moses saw. Yeah. It was on fire and yet not being consumed.
Correct.
And it's miraculous, the power that God is showing off here, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But what, again, sticks out to me is in verses 28 and 29. He says in verse 29, it's Nebuchadnezzar making another step in his faith, I believe.
Yeah.
But he says, therefore, I make a decree. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid to ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way.
Yeah.
So, first, Daniel interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and he says, it was my God that did this. It wasn't me. Yeah. And so Nebuchadnezzar's like, wow, your God is God of gods, Lord of kings. He's the revealer of mysteries. And now he sees this miracle. And Nebuchadnezzar says, wow, anyone who speaks against this God. And so first it was like, wow, he's the top of all of the gods that are out there. And now he says, okay, you can't even speak against this God. Otherwise you're going to be torn limb from limb.
Yeah.
And he says that there's no other God who is able to rescue in this way. In other words, his power is greater. So not only is he the revealer of mysteries, but he is the most powerful God. There is no other God who can rescue in this way. And we see Nebuchadnezzar's faith progressing, but it doesn't just quite progress enough.
Correct.
And that's what we get to in chapter 4. There's another dream that Nebuchadnezzar has that Daniel interprets for him again.
Yeah.
That comes to pass, but it's Nebuchadnezzar being humbled by God. Because
verse 32? Says, you shall be driven from among men. Your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and you shall be made to eat grass like an ox. Mm-hmm. 7 periods of time shall pass over you, whatever that means, however much time that is. We don't really know. It says, until you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he wills. Immediately the word was fulfilled against Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from among men and ate grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven till his hair grew as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like birds' claws.
Yeah, so he basically went out of his mind, became like a beast in the field.
Yeah.
And it was because he still had more pride in his own kingdom than he had faith in God. And so as we see throughout these first 4 chapters here, that Nebuchadnezzar's faith in God was progressing and was developing.
Yeah.
He never let go of self.
Correct.
It kind of reminds me of that song that we sing. It's like the first verse is all of self and none of thee. It progresses. Okay. Some of self, some of thee. Okay. More of thee, less of self. And then eventually the last verse is none of self, all of thee.
Yeah.
And Nebuchadnezzar doesn't get quite there. And so God humbles him. And again, Daniel's the one to interpret the dream to tell Nebuchadnezzar, this is going to happen to you. And then it comes true, and that does happen to Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah. Verse 37, though, I
was going to say things kind of turn back at the end. He is kind of restored to what he was before. And in verses 36 and 37, Nebuchadnezzar says, at the same time, my reason returned to me. For the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me. My counselors and my lords sought me, and I was established in my kingdom, and still more greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven. For all his works are right, and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble.
Yeah.
And so we see a king of a nation that knew not God, that God was using in order to punish his own people, the Israelites, in order to take them, correct them, take them into exile for 70 years. But we see the influence from Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego led to Nebuchadnezzar, but even more after that, even Darius and then Cyrus eventually, both exhibiting some amount of faith in God. I would say Darius probably more so than Cyrus, who are the next couple of kings that we'll look at. But it's this influence of when you live out your own faith, as Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have here, people see that, and it develops faith within them as well.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, in this story, there are some of these kings and some of the other royal officials that don't believe, but we see the influence that some of them have.
Yeah.
And one of the things I find super interesting, well, I'll go ahead and mention it now. I was going to save it for the end. But one of the things I find interesting as far as faith being contagious and acts of faith being contagious is all the way in the New Testament. We're 500 years in the future when Jesus is being born. And it says that wise men came from the east because they knew what signs to look for. They saw the star. And so they came from the east to come see the newborn king.
Yeah.
I can't help but think those are wise men who were students of students of students of Daniel. That faith, that influence that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and so many others had over there in Babylon and in Persia, that was carried on.
Yeah.
And then eventually when the star that's shining over Bethlehem is seen, then these wise men who were Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were eunuchs or wise men.
Yep.
They're in the king's court.
Yep.
500 years later, those same wise men, not the same wise men, but the same group of people are the ones who recognize the signs for the Son of God being born into the world.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
So we don't have time to go over 5. I don't think we'll even be able to get to Cyrus. So Cyrus we see in chapter 11 towards the end, but we're going to take a little time here.
Yeah, and Cyrus is the one that comes way later, and it's 70 years after the Israelites were taken into captivity, and he's the one that releases them.
Correct.
He's the king that you can read at the beginning of Ezra chapter 1. Also, the end of 2 Chronicles, Jeremiah prophesied about Cyrus being the one to send them back. Way before Cyrus was even born. Jeremiah prophesied about this is the king that's going to send them back 70 years later. But Cyrus is the one that sends them back. And that's not so much, I think, a testament to Cyrus's faith as much as it is a testament to God's power that he can work in any and everyone.
Yes.
So anyways, chapter 6.
All right. So we'll make this real quick. We're not going to be able to read too much scripture. I know we're already cutting it on time. So we've got Daniel in the lion's den is this common story that we know about, right? Well, there's a decree that is sent out by Darius, right? Not Nebuchadnezzar. So we've got a new king now. His name's Darius. And he essentially says for a month, nobody can pray to anybody but me for 30 days. And the reason he did that,
I was going to say he was almost kind of tricked into it.
Yes. Yeah. The reason he did that was because Daniel was so high up in the government and in the kingdom that all the other people were jealous. And so they were like, well, how can we catch this guy? And they realized that the only way they were going to catch him was to make a decree against his religion because he wasn't doing anything wrong.
Well, because if they try to make a decree about anything else other than his faith, then Daniel's going to say, okay, I'll abide by the laws of this nation. That's the kind of character, again, that Daniel is that he's not going to say, oh, well, I just disagree with this law from the king, so I'm going to go against it. Daniel is...
he's an upstanding citizen.
Exactly. And he's humble enough to say that if the king says this, then I obey the king unless it comes to my faith in my God.
Correct. And so this decree goes out that, because they knew, they'd been watching him, they knew that he prayed to God 3 times a day, and he prayed at the same time, and he prayed in the open. It wasn't like he was trying to hide it.
No.
And so they convince Darius, and basically they say, wouldn't it be nice, Darius, if everybody, just prayed to you for 30 days?
For the next month,
Just only to you. And Darius, thinking about it, that would be nice.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool. So he signs it, and he signs it with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which at this point cannot be revoked. So it goes forward, and then all the officials, they go out and they find the evidence. They find Daniel praying, not to Darius, but rather to Jehovah, to God. And they bring him before the king, and the king he's upset and he's sad because Darius really, really loves Daniel.
Yeah.
But the law is the law. And so he follows the law. He throws him into the lion's den, and he couldn't sleep. right?
Oh, yeah. It says that he fasted all night long.
Yeah.
There were no provisions brought to him. And I think the way it's phrased is that sleep left him.
Yes.
Or in verse 18, and sleep fled from him.
Yeah, like he was so concerned and worried. All he could think about was his servant Daniel.
Yeah.
So in the morning, sunrise, he gets up, and it's almost like he runs there, right? The king arose and went in haste.
Yeah.
Imagine a king running after you.
Yeah.
A convicted criminal. Because that's really technically what Daniel was at this point.
Yeah, basically.
The king's running after him. And he gets there, and he cries out in a tone of anguish, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" He's asking a den of lions, who likely, anybody thrown in the lion's den, these lions have been starved. They're hungry.
Oh, yeah.
And this is fresh meat.
Yeah.
Right? And so he asks that in the den of lions, and Daniel responds. And he says, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm." And so what I find really interesting about the rest of this is Daniel's brought up out of the lion's den, and he throws the other officials in there, and it says that their bones were broken before they hit the ground.
Yeah.
So these lions, they were ferocious, and they were hungry, and they just...
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it shows the power of God for sure. And it shows that, while we likely won't have miracles like this today, if we trust in God, God will provide for us. God will take care of us. And the sins that we have will be forgiven.
It has to be the same kind of attitude as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. My God has the ability to do this.
Yeah.
But even if he doesn't, I'm not going to bow down to anything else besides him. My God has the ability to deliver me. My God has the ability to save me.
Yeah.
But even if he chooses to let me go through these trials, even to physically die, whatever kind of persecution you may throw at me, so be it. Because it's not going to alter my faith. I love the statement that you made just a second ago. Imagine a king running after you to see if you're okay. Yeah. That's exactly what God is doing for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
A king running to us. It reminds me of the prodigal son.
Yeah.
Running to us to receive us.
Yeah. To make sure we're okay.
Yeah. Towards the end of chapter 6 here, in verse 25, though, Darius makes this decree. It says in verse 25, "The king Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth." So this is his whole kingdom. This
Everybody.
is like imagine majority of the world is underneath his kingdom, his reign. And he says, "Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." And then narrator comes in verse 28 and says, "So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian." Who conquered over the Persians, became the next
over the Babylonians.
Became the next powerhouse, and then Rome became the next powerhouse over the Persians after that. So it's incredible what one small beginning of, you know what, I know what God expects of me to do, and it's not to eat this food. And so I can't do this, led to a decree going out to the entire world stating that all people are going to fear and tremble before the God of Daniel. That's incredible. Like that's the faith the size of a mustard seed is going to move a mountain type of thing.
And really it all boils down to the belief we have in God. You know, I believe with all my heart that God is capable of doing anything and everything that he so desires to do. I know that he has already done so much in sending his son, right? And sending Jesus Christ, he has already done so much. And so my faith resides in God. And so, we have all of these, Hebrews 12, right? Since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, right? Mm-hmm. We are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, of faithful men and women who have served and who have loved God. And we get to use their example and their experience to bolster our own faith. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I don't have anything else, man.
No, that's all for me too. We always appreciate y'all listening though. Like Chris mentioned at the beginning, if y'all have any characters that you want us to take a deep dive into and look into a character study, for any individual in Scripture, we'd be happy to do so. Or if there's any other topics y'all would like us to talk about, reach out to us. Send us an email or Facebook message, however you can reach out, and we'll be happy to do that. So as always, thank y'all for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Bible Conversations. We want to ask if you have any questions, suggestions, or comments that you please email us at kcocbibleconversations@gmail.com.
You can also find us on social media. We've got a Facebook page as well as an Instagram account. Our Facebook page is very simple. It's just Bible Conversations. On Instagram, it's very simple, at Bible Conversations. Look us up, like our posts, and share it with your friends.
We also have an opportunity for you to help us financially through a store via Kim's Closet. And you can find that. You can just type into Google Kim's Closet. We have a link as well that we will be posting in each of our episodes, and we just hope that you will reach out and find us and purchase a hoodie or a shirt with the logo on it, and that way you can spread the word without having to say a word. So we appreciate you. Thank you all. Have a blessed week.